What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode here of the Sci Guys Football Forum. Post-Christmas, you kind of noticed that we took a little bit of a break there. We had some social posts on our Twitter timeline, so make sure you follow us at all of our Twitter handles down below. That's why we have the ticker there, so you're always up to date with everything that's happening with us. We took a little bit of a break. Tad, with your annual trip back home, that was part of the reason why we took the break. How was your Christmas?
It was pretty nice actually. Got to spend some time with family, and unfortunately, I had to come back to Dallas really quickly. I'm sure as people notice, this is not my usual backdrop, and that is because your boy's moving. It's not going so well. That's why there are all those open boxes. I'm putting this off way too late. I'm moving tomorrow. So next time we drop an episode, you guys will be able to see a great new backdrop, hopefully much nicer. That's also why I'm wearing a very wrinkly shirt right now, because when you move, laundry is just like the least of your concerns. So it's been an interesting couple days for me.
Exactly. So, yeah, there may be a little bit of a break this week as well, as Tad is packing things up, moving into his new place. So, always, like I said, follow us at all of our social handles. Make sure you subscribe.
We're still going to be posting. Yeah, we're still going to be doing a lot of stuff on social media. So, be sure to check us out there.
Follow all those handles. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, so then you're always aware, getting alerts as far as when the latest and greatest is happening from the Desai Guys. But we definitely wanted to squeeze in an episode here for this week, just in case we don't get any more episodes out this week. We want to do a quick review of the fantasy season. We have obviously the end of season awards that the NFL has. So me and Tad, we sort of came together with 4 different awards for the fantasy season, and we're going to give our picks as far as the MVP of the fantasy season, the most disappointing player of the fantasy season, the most impressive rookie of the fantasy season, and the most surprising player of the fantasy season. So we're going to go one by one through all of those. Tad, let's start with the biggest award here, and that's the MVP award. Who do you have as your fantasy MVP of the 2021 season?
Come on, man. You got to ask. It's my boy. It's Jonathan Taylor. Come on. There's no way. It's a running back on my favorite team. I traded for him just a couple of weeks ago, and the guy I traded for him is probably going to beat me in the championship, because it was such a lopsided trade, but I just had to have Jonathan Taylor on my team. He's my favorite player on my fantasy team because he is just so good. And before I get into his stats, a fun story. So my other league, not the one I share with you, of course, is an auction draft. So the guy who ended up drafting him was actually out in California during the draft. The rest of the league, most of the league, was in Texas, and we all drafted together in the same room. Well, the price on Jonathan Taylor is going up and up and up and up, and it reaches around $50, something around that. And I told everyone there, I'm like, guys, Jimmy's going hard for him. Let him overbid. And they go, really? I'm like, I'm telling you, Jonathan Taylor's going to be a bust. Don't go hard. I have not heard the end of it from my league. They're like, oh yeah, Jonathan Taylor's gonna be a bust, right? I'm like, I don't know what happened. I thought Marlon Mack was gonna come back in a big way and kind of dig into his carry numbers, but man, you want to talk about Jonathan Taylor? This dude is on fire. Since week 4, he's only had 1 week that he scored less than 15 points. That's absurd. And he's had 7 weeks going over 20 points. Those are quarterback numbers. Those are not running back numbers right there. So actually, ironically, I'm thanking my lucky stars I'm in the championship because he is on my team. The worst week he's had since week 4 was this past week against the Arizona Cardinals. But even then, he had 11 points. So, not a great week by any stretch, but not a terrible one either. So, you are truly the fantasy MVP when even your worst week is still a pretty solid week. So, Jonathan Taylor's got my vote for MVP.
No, that's a fair pick there. I'd probably have him as a pick as well. I think the one reason that I did not go with Jonathan Taylor specifically was because he was already projected as a late first round running back anyways, depending on the league that you're playing in.
That's fair.
Late first round, early second round. So I think for that reason alone, it's like you're already expecting him to do that well. So I understand in your specific situation, you were like, I don't think he's going to do good. You're going to have everybody overpay for him sort of thing. But I think there was a little bit of a preseason projection that it's like he's going to be the lead guy. Obviously, with the rookie season that he had, the offensive line is just amazing in Indianapolis as well. So it's just like it was predicted that he was going to have that.
The offensive line is amazing when all of our starters aren't out for the entire game.
Well, of course. But I think, like I said, I think the projection was already there that he was going to put up really good numbers for you because he was going in the first round, possibly early second round there. So, but yeah, I mean, nobody predicted that he'd have this great of a season. So obviously it's like return on investment plus. That's definitely the case. But just like, yeah, I think that's the only reason why I didn't pick him as a fantasy MVP. But I completely understand the pick there. I went with a kind of other obvious choice, and that's Cooper Kupp of the Los Angeles Rams. Now, it's no secret that if you had Kupp on your roster, you're probably in the playoffs, maybe in the championship game, unless, you know, you have Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford, and for some reason they can't beat the Vikings, and you end up scoring 50 total points on your fantasy roster.
I don't know how I made the championship game. I had Stafford and Jonathan Taylor. And I was like, okay, if I have those two, they're going to carry me. I won despite those two. Like, it was such a weird weekend.
Yeah, just a little bit of a side note there. In the league that me and Tad share, we were both the first and second seeds.
I wasn't going to tell the listeners this.
Yeah, and we went one and done. Unfortunately, our teams just did not perform the way we did. I had Matthew Stafford, as mentioned, and Cooper Kupp, and Cooper Kupp played his part. He ended up going for over, I think, 15 points and stuff like that. Stafford did not play his part. I had Tyreek Hill. He did not have a good game. It just did not work in my favor, and I think, Tad, for you, the same thing happened.
Well, kind of, but the guy I played had Justin Jackson going. So, yeah,
yes, he picked up Justin Jackson the night before I saw that. Yeah. He also had Josh Allen, who had a great game. And, yeah, me
and Amir had an argument about this because I was debating. I was like, do I start Alexander Madison or do I start Chase Edmonds? And I started Alexander Madison because we only have 2 spots to start running back, which is the dumbest line. We're not getting into this, guys. We're not just whatever. Anyway, Cooper Kupp, keep going.
Yeah, we'll vent about that on another
We are
episode.
putting this up to a league vote next year.
But yeah, based on ESPN standard PPR scoring, he's on track to finish as the best fantasy player this season. So number one, that counts quarterbacks as well. I mean, he currently has 391.4 fantasy points, is averaging 26.1 fantasy points per game. I mean, that is more than the highest scoring quarterback, which is Josh Allen currently at 23.9 points per game. So it's just, if you're getting that points from your wide receiver, that's insanity. You pair him up with a good quarterback, it's like, yeah, there's a reason why you're probably doing really well in your fantasy league. He's only had 2 games so far this season. I brought this stat up before where he's failed to score 20 fantasy points. Also, he's only had 1 game so far this entire season where he's failed to get at least 7 receptions and at least 90 receiving yards. So, I mean, that's the model of consistency. Especially when you're playing fantasy football, you want that consistency from your players. So if your player's doing that week in and week out, then it's like, okay, this was an excellent pick. And so the big thing is that Matthew Stafford, he was freshly acquired. He, for some reason, was looking Cooper Kupp's direction. Like, he's by far the leader in targets on this team. He has 177. The next closest is Van Jefferson with 81. So it's clearly like Matt Stafford is looking Kupp's direction each and every time. Obviously, with Odell Beckham, we'll see how that goes into next year. But just, it's insane just how good he's been this year. We already mentioned there's still 2 games left to go in this fantasy season, so we'll see what sort of numbers he could finish with. But for me, like, it's insane the type of season he's had. But I also, as we sort of take a look also towards next year as well and possibly in the future, this is one of those seasons where it's like once in a lifetime. He is going to regress. He'll still be a good receiver. There's no question about that. But these type of numbers, do not expect it next year. You're going to see a regression for sure. But clearly, Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, that is a healthy connection. So next year, Cooper Kupp's ADP is going to go a lot higher. So that's also a reason why I have Kupp as my MVP, because he was drafted, somewhere around possibly the 3rd, 4th, possibly 5th round, depending on the league you're in. And so to get that sort of return on investment, like I said, highest scoring fantasy player at ESPN PPR score, that's just insanity. So for me, it was a clear pick for Cooper Kupp MVP.
100%. Honestly, if you didn't take Cooper Kupp here, he was going to be my pick for most surprising player. For exactly what you just said is just no one saw this coming. I called Jonathan Taylor being a bust. That was just a bad guess. But like, I didn't give a second thought to Cooper Kupp. I was like, okay, he'll be kind of middle tier, wide receiver, flex, wide receiver 2 type of guy. No, this is arguably the best receiving fantasy season we've seen since Megatron's 2,000-yard, I believe, season about a decade ago. And who was his quarterback back then? Matt Stafford. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I'm glad we let that suspense build. But I give a lot of credit to Stafford here too, is because I think that's a huge reason why this is working. But yeah, Cooper Kupp coming out of absolutely nowhere. excellent pick for MVP.
Yeah. Yeah,
Hard
just
to
last
argue
bit, too, is just obviously with Los Angeles, before the injury, Robert Woods was on the team as well. You had Van Jefferson. You're curious about, whether just the running game is probably going to get more involved, the tight end possibly, but it's just like, yeah, it was Cooper Kupp by far a mile. Like I said, just 177 targets. Like I said, next closest is 81. That's just insane to me. That's just like clearly going to him and him only.
I wasn't traded for it, but remember when they got OBJ and they're like, oh, what does this mean for Cooper Kupp? Like, oh,
Yeah.
Come on, guys. Like, come on.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens in future years. But yeah, this year I think clearly he should be one of the picks for fantasy MVP, along with Jonathan Taylor. There's a few other names that we want to throw out there as well. But yeah, so let's obviously flip it to the other side of the coin here, Tad. The most disappointing player. So who unfortunately just did not fit the bill this year in 2021?
So to give our listeners a little bit of insight, I feel like I say this every week, is Amir got his picks in before me. So we usually send each other's picks. I was so excited to see that you did not pick this player, because this guy is I don't understand how you could argue against this guy being the most disappointing fantasy player of the season. Julio Jones.
Yeah, he was on one of my picks as well, but yeah, I went in a different direction. But yeah, I agree. Julio Jones was very disappointing.
Crap, Julio Jones. Like, okay, I get it if he's not the wide receiver one that people look, guys, I'm not saying that, I'm above you. I saw this coming. I said he was going to have a great career revitalization season 2, even though his career really didn't need revitalization. He was doing just in Atlanta. But anyway, this was going to be a great new step for his career. I totally bought into that hype. Woo! That was wrong. That was so wrong. So, yeah, look, I get that he was hampered by injuries, but more importantly, I think we thought that he'd be sharing the ball a little bit more with Amir. Is it okay if I say his name? I know he's kind of on the top of your hit list after last week.
Yeah, just say
okay.
it.
All right, there we go. All right, so I know he was going to share the ball a little bit more with AJ Brown, but I'm sorry. Get a cornerback, and that won't be a problem anymore.
Yeah, they better. Well,
Yeah.
that's a
corner
talk for another
or quarterback,
day.
either or.
Continue
Put
with
Trey
Julio
Lance
Jones.
in. Anyway, so I think that ball sharing expectation was not anywhere close to met. Even though he was buried by injuries, he still played a majority of the season. He only got over 10 points once this season. He had a 15-point performance in the second week of the season. And, someone smart took advantage of that and booted him off my roster via trade right after that. So if you were smart enough to sell Julio Jones high, good call. But just with the expectations with the trade and everything, and that offense that you're stepping into, honestly, above everything else, I don't blame Tannehill. I don't blame AJ Brown. I blame Arthur Smith for leaving. How ironic is that? He goes to Atlanta, boots Julio Jones out of there, and the guy who was once in Tennessee is his reason for failing in Tennessee. Because I think Arthur Smith is clearly a good offensive mind, and even with Derrick Henry in there, that Tennessee offense was just not the same. So I think that really affected things. Now, real quick before I get to your pick, Amir, I took a look. I will give you this at least. He was below 50th. So where do you guess Julio Jones, as of recording, has ranked in terms of all fantasy receivers? Below 50th.
See, I was kind of looking this up earlier because it kind of relates to my pick. So I think he's somewhere in the 80s. I want to say like 82.
82? Okay. All right. He's 101st.
Oh, jeez. I knew he was somewhere in that range. I just couldn't remember the exact number. But, yeah, it's
He's 101st best receiver in fantasy football. Julio Jones.
Yeah.
Just terrible. Just horribly disappointing, and easily the most disappointing player in my book. Because I should say, I don't know about you, Amir, but I try not to include like a Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley. I almost picked Barkley because he's had a little bit of time since coming back from injury.
Yeah.
But if injuries really affected your season, I try to stay away from that.
I agree. That's part of the reason why I stayed away from a couple of names as well. But, yeah, Julio Jones, I think it's just – I know you don't blame Tannehill and the offense and Arthur Smith. I feel it's more of that whole collective thing. We talked about this before in a previous episode where it's just like Ryan Tannehill did not have as great a season as he did in last season, where he was like such a surprising quarterback and fantasy quarterback for that matter. And so we thought that he'd take that into this year, and that would be a good situation for Julio Jones as well as A.J. Brown, take a little bit off of Derrick Henry. It turned out to still be a Derrick Henry show until he got hurt. But, yeah, because because Ryan Tannehill could not play all that well. You could obviously attribute that to a different offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith leaving, so it's like maybe he had to make those adjustments, so just not looking the same. So it's like, for me, I think it's more like that whole collective sort of situation where it's just like that offense was just for some reason not clicking. The defense sort of kept him in a lot of games too. So it's like, but yeah, I agree that it's like Arthur Smith plays a huge role in that, but I think it's also because of that Arthur Smith, it's the trickle-down effect to like it affects Tannehill, it affects A.J. Brown, it affects Derrick Henry, it affects the play calling, obviously. So it's just like all of that sort of gets collectively effective as to why Julio Jones didn't perform. But A.J. Brown didn't perform all that well throughout the entire season either. Yeah, he had a great game on Thursday, and he had a couple games here and there, but yeah, not to the extent of Julio Jones, but just like it wasn't consistent.
Right.
That's the big thing.
No,
so,
100%. Well, and
yeah.
I think the term you're looking for with collective and trickle down is all correct. The correct term you're looking for is shit show.
All right, you can say it a little bit more bluntly than I did, but yeah, I think that's very appropriate for sure. But Julio Jones, that's a really good pick there. I'm going with the receiver as well. I'm going with Allen Robinson of the Chicago Bears. Now, obviously, he's coming back. He's coming off of back-to-back 1,000 receiving yard seasons. He's playing better as a Bear, surprisingly compared to when he was with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was franchise tagged. I'm wondering if that played into a little bit about his season. There's lots of rumors that's like...
Why would it? Hold on. Why would it? That would encourage him to play harder.
I don't know, but it's just like from what I read about some articles out there that's like maybe he wasn't playing to the fullest extent because he was just not happy with the way the offense was going. He didn't want to be tagged in the first place. Like, I don't know how much we can believe about this, but, somebody's writing it. Maybe there's a small kernel of truth in that. I don't know. But regardless, you draft a guy like Justin Fields, you think that's going to bring a boon to your offense. Even if you're not going to go with Justin Fields, I don't know why Matt Nagy decided not to go with Justin Fields to begin with. Andy Dalton's still a very capable quarterback. He was a really good quarterback in Cincinnati. He had a lot of great receivers there, helped them get a lot of great seasons. Played with A.J. Green, obviously, when he was in his prime. So you thought that this offense would still look good with Allen Robinson as a number one receiver, but for some reason, just the big nagging point is just, nagging, the key word there. Matt Nagy was just not doing things properly. The offense just, had, no consistency. Unfortunately, David Montgomery hurt. Maybe that played a little bit into the effectiveness of the play calling. But just like Allen Robinson was absent a lot of the games that he was playing in. I know he was hurt. He did deal with a hamstring injury for about 3 games. And most recently, he was on the COVID list, missed another 2 games. But in 10 games, he's gone over 50 receiving yards 3 times. That's 30% of your games. That's terrible. And on top of that, he scored only 1 touchdown all season. Rushing, receiving, doesn't matter. Only 1. And the biggest thing, this is why I picked the players that I did for this particular episode, is the return on your investment as far as where they're drafted. Allen Robinson was being drafted as a top 10 receiver based on your draft board. So he was going somewhere in that late second, possibly early third, but definitely by the 3rd round, he was being drafted because people thought he was going to be really good with Andy Dalton, and definitely when Justin Fields came into play, he was going to be a really good option for Justin Fields as well. But, the emergence of Darnell Mooney, maybe that played a factor. Cole Kmet started to develop into a better tight end, but it's just, this is a huge issue too. When your passing offense is bottom 5 in passing attempts, after coming off a season where you were 8th in passing attempts, that's obviously going to affect things as well. So, overall, I think it's because of the return on investment. You're drafting this guy as a top 10 receiver, definitely a wide receiver 1 on your fantasy roster. He just did not deliver on those factors, so that's the reason why he's one of my most disappointing players. I also had guys I had Julio Jones as a possibility. I wanted to say Calvin Ridley, but, when you're taking time off for mental health, that's definitely something that we could respect. Yes, it sucks as a fantasy player because he didn't play a majority of the season for you, and you invested probably a 2nd-round pick in him, but you know what? That's a separate issue. Like I said, we want to avoid those types of situations. I also had Miles Sanders as a disappointing player. Now he's starting to look a little bit better, but majority of the season he was not. I mean, there's a couple of names out there, but
that mother effer. I even started this last week, and then I was like, okay, great. I was on a flight for most of Sunday afternoon. I landed. I was like, what? 5 points? And I'm like, okay, I knew he was dealing with a quad thing. Did that pop up? And it's like, no, he broke his hand. I'm like,
yeah. So. But yeah, for me, it's been Allen Robinson. So, Tad, let's move into the next award here. Let's go to the most surprising player. So, who's a guy that just came out of nowhere and you were like, man, I did not expect this guy to have the season that he's having this year. Cooper Kupp is a great nominee there. Obviously, I already nominated him as MVP. I do not have him as a duplicate for this award as well. But yeah, you said this was a possibility for one of your picks. Did you end up going with him, or did you go in a different direction?
So for the sake of shaking things up, I decided to go someone else because I was actually shocked. Like I told our viewers just a little bit ago, I had second pick on players, and I was like, oh, I know who he's going with. You actually went and told a separate player, which I should have seen coming for reasons that will quickly become obvious. But
not that big of a secret there as far as where I'm going.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Honestly, it's a very vanilla pick for a surprise player, but we just got to give this dude his props. Cordell Patterson.
Yeah, I felt that was the obvious pick, so that's specifically why it went a different direction. But yeah,
I gotta go.
He's definitely one of those picks for sure.
Just like if it was like some player who used to be good also had a resurgence, I feel a little less. But like this dude was just a middle tier receiver for his entire career, and then out of nowhere, he is one of the best fantasy running backs in the league. Like that's just insane to me. So he is, again, as of recording, because we know there are 2 more games left because of the stupid extended season. As of recording, Cordell Patterson is currently ranked as the 8th best running back. This dude largely went undrafted. Like, if you're going to talk about return on investment...
I wouldn't say largely. I'd probably say in almost every league, he probably went undrafted. Unless you're in, like, some super deep, 16, 24-man league. And it's like, okay, he probably got drafted. But, yeah, I'd probably say with more certainty they probably went undrafted in majority of leagues.
And the reason he went undrafted, and this is what makes his performance even more impressive, is the fact that he beat out Mike Davis, who was a huge...
Another pick for disappointed player.
Exactly. Actually, Mike Davis was on my short list of maybe I should go with him. But he beat out Mike Davis, and it's just, he did so well this season. So real quick, he only finished below 10 points 3 times this entire season. So even, again, kind of the same deal as Jonathan Taylor. Even when he does bad... doesn't really do that badly.
Still not that bad. Yeah, double-digit points, still double-digit points, right?
So, here's the thing. He averaged about 14.3, as if I'm not going to give you the exact number. He averaged 14.3 points a game this season. That is more than Aaron Jones, Antonio Gibson, Josh Jacobs, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. All those guys were drafted way, way before. As we say, those guys were drafted, period. Like, he was even drafted. So
most of those guys were probably first-round picks, too.
Exactly. So, look, I know it's a vanilla pick. I know everyone's going, wow, thanks for the inside tab. But, look, I got to give credit where credit is due. Cordell Patterson, you just take your surprise player trophy.
Yeah, honestly, sometimes even though it's a vanilla pick, that just means it's that obvious of a pick. That's like, clearly this is the guy that surprised everybody, that it's a unanimous pick. Like, I mean, there's a reason why it's such a big deal when an MVP is unanimous, because, everybody thought this guy was the best player in the season. So it's like, in this case, yeah, everybody did not expect Cordell Patterson to beat out Mike Davis and to have the season that he had.
I will own up to it. I was one of those idiots that was like week 2 or week 3 on this show. If you go back on YouTube and find it, I said, do not pick up Cordell Patterson. That is a flash in the pan. That is not a sustainable, formula. Well, even the experts get it wrong sometimes. People he just proved everyone wrong.
Very, very true there. So yeah, even though it's a vanilla pick, I think it's a very accurate pick. So call it vanilla if you want, but yeah, like I said, it's one of those things where it's just everybody did not expect this to happen. So
exactly.
Excellent.
All right,
pick
Homer
there.
Simpson, you go.
Yeah, no secret to my pick here. I'm going with most surprising player here, Deebo Samuel. Honestly, he was an honorable mention for MVP award because once again, the approach.
Get out of here.
The approach that I took for these picks, because like I said, it's the return on the investment as far as where they're being drafted. Deebo Samuel was being drafted somewhere between the 7th and 9th rounds. In one league that I was playing in, he got drafted in the 10th round. So it's it's amazing the production that he's giving you at that level as far as where you're drafting him then, right? So currently ranked as the 4th highest scoring fantasy receiver and the 6th highest scoring player total among all non-quarterback positions. He's actually 13th among all players if you count quarterbacks as well. So, I mean, he's up there. But this is the insanity, Ted. I just can't believe this. So, through the first 9 weeks of the season, he was a receiving threat. So total 49 receptions, 882 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns, also had 1 rushing touchdown. Speaking of that rushing touchdown, since week 10, in the 6 games that he's played since week 10, in those 6 games, 279 rushing yards now, 6 rushing touchdowns. Along with that, he's still a receiving threat. 365 receiving yards, 21 receptions, 1 receiving touchdown. He totally became a versatile weapon in that offense. Things that we saw in his rookie year with Kyle Shanahan. Unfortunately, he was derailed by injuries in 2020. But this year, it's clearly with issues in the running game, Trey Sermon was drafted. He's nowhere to be seen. Elijah Mitchell has been really great, but he's been dealing with injuries throughout the season, concussions, leg injuries. Jeff Wilson Jr. was on the IR list for the longest time. Raheem Mostert was injured the very first game, out for the entire season. So it's Shanahan had to look for different ways to sort of get his playmakers the ball. Deebo Samuel became a running back in the second half of the season. It's just amazing that he's the receiver position, but he's totaling these crazy numbers. Like I said, the biggest thing as to why he's my surprising player as well, very much to the same reason that Cordell Patterson is an amazing surprise player as well, is because of that ADP. Like I said, he was being targeted somewhere in that 7th to maybe 9th round. Like I said, in one league, he's drafted in the 10th round, so it's just everybody expected Brandon Ayuk to be a really good receiver in this offense. He had the slow start, and obviously he started to turn it on a little bit here, but because of that slow start, Deebo Samuel was able to reap the rewards, and so for me, he's been one of the more surprising players in fantasy.
Sumer, I want to take you into a vision of the future. It's the year 2300. The Earth is up in flames. We're all dead. It's a dystopian future. Everyone's miserable. However, a member of the Shanahan family can still turn any bum into a good rushing attack. I don't understand. Kyle Shanahan could take you or me right now off the streets and be like, all right, here's the plan, and we're going to rush for 1,000 yards. So, it was like Shanahan got tired of being like, oh, yeah, you think that Elijah Mitchell was impressive, a 6th-round rookie? Watch me turn a receiver into a good running back, too. And it's just all right, dude, cool. That's why all this talk Shanahan on the hot seat. It's you're going to do better than that? Really? No.
No, because that's the big thing. That's the big thing everybody keeps saying. That's okay, what if they fire him? He's going to get a job tomorrow. Some other team is going to hire him and be like, dude, you are on our team right now.
Hey, Frank Reich or Shanahan, I honestly would be like, maybe Shanahan? I'm pretty happy with Frank Reich.
Yeah. But so it's just insanity to think that they would fire him. But obviously they had to talk about it because of the season that they were projected to have.
Right.
And unfortunately, the season that they're dealing with right now is obviously a little bit of a misconnection there. But we'll talk about that obviously once we get to our off-season episodes. But let's close it out here.
Many off-season topics. It's gonna be great.
So many things we can talk about. Let's close it out here. Let's talk about the greatest and most impressive fantasy rookie here.
You got first pick, you asshole.
So I actually had a little bit of trouble with this one because the big thing.
Out of here.
No, honestly, here's my reasoning. So most of these rookies have played really well, but the big thing is that they haven't been consistent. So it's I looked at Najee Harris. He played really well to start the season, then he started to taper off. Same thing with Jamar Chase. Started really well, started to taper off. Then you got guys like Javonte Williams. Started slow, and now he's looking really good. So it's I haven't seen it over the course of the entire season. So that's why I struggled a little bit. But I still ended up going with Jamar Chase because I think the numbers are there more. So it's even though it may be front-loaded, I think it's still impressive the things they do. So I'm going to start with a quote that we brought up many times before, but here's the direct quote from Jamar Chase in the preseason. The ball is different because it is bigger. It doesn't have the white stripes on the side, so you can't see the ball coming from the tip point. So you actually have to look for the strings on the ball at the top, which is hard to see because the whole ball is brown and you have the 6 strings that are white. So this was a quote from the Cincinnati Bengals website, Bengals.com, about why Jamar Chase was having so many drops in the preseason. That's what he said. Tad, I think you figured it out because he is the 8th-ranked fantasy wide receiver right now. Current stat line right now with 2 games to go, obviously, 68 receptions, 1,163 receiving yards, and 10 receiving touchdowns. He is one of 5 players in the NFL with 10 receiving touchdowns, double-digit touchdowns, Obviously, that may change with 2 more games left to play, but that's still an impressive stat right now. Another great value pick of fantasy drafts. Like, once again, very similar to Deebo Samuel's, targeted somewhere in that 7th to 8th round, possibly the 9th round. And so it's like, if you're getting a guy that's giving you the 6th most fantasy points among all wide receivers, like, that's great return on your investment. Excellent value pick later in your drafts there. Joe Burrow, this Bengals offense has just been top 10 scoring and offense, as well as the top 10 passing offense, both in passing yards and passing touchdowns. Here's the thing as to why it gave me a little bit of struggle. We talked about him tapering off towards the end of the season. Because he's getting more attention now, this is just great for the Bengals offense because T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd have also started to go off. T. Higgins is over the 1,000-yard receiving mark. Tyler Boyd needs 208 receiving yards to pass the 1,000 receiving mark to make things come through, to have the Bengals receivers all with 1,000 yards each. So we'll see if that happens with 2 games left. It's very possible.
I don't know if you did this on purpose. I don't know if you did this on purpose, but that was a question we were discussing in the preseason episode. And you said, is it possible the Bengals could have 3 receivers go for over 1,000 yards? And my response was, are you insane? Like, that is so hard to do. There's no way. And, yeah, they're about to make me look like a jackass.
But, yeah, so for me, Ja'Marr Chase, Rookie of the Year for fantasy purposes for sure. Possibly going to be the Rookie of the Year in the NFL, too. We'll see about that.
I'd be shocked if anyone else got it.
Well, like I said, Jaylen Waddle sort of sneaking up there. Najee Harris will definitely get some tension there. But, yeah, I think Ja'Marr Chase is probably the front runner. But I don't think it's a lock for sure. But fantasy purposes, I think it's a lock.
I disagree. I think it's a lock in both of them. But
okay.
So I'm actually going to switch things up on you, Murr, because spoiler alert to our audience, I was going to pick Jaylen Waddle, but just a couple minutes before we started airing, I was like, let me look into Harris again. Harris is more consistent, so I'm going Najee Harris here for best rookie. So Jaylen Waddle, he was really, really good this year. He played for most of the year, but his consistency was left a little bit to be desired. He'd go for 13 points, and then 2 points, and then 11 points, and then 5 points. Not blaming Waddle, that's pretty consistent for a middle-of-the-road receiver, but Najee Harris, yeah, look, like, he had a couple of weeks there where he was posting 20-plus points, and everyone was like, okay, he's the next rock star, and then he dropped back down to earth in quote marks, but by that it was basically meaning ever since then he's been around 13 or 14 points every week since then. So there have been a couple weeks before people start yelling at me like, what about that 1 week where he had 5 points and he lost me that? I'm like, okay, yeah, he's had 3 weeks where he's gone below 10 points the entire season. We are 16 weeks in. That's fucking ridiculous. Like, that is really good, especially for a running back. Now, I will say, like, from a pure talent standpoint, and not talent, but from a pure output standpoint of, like, okay, where are his points coming from? Yeah, most of them are coming from dump-off passes that he turns into 10 yards and stuff like that. So as a rusher, am I that impressed of what I see from him? I don't think he's a generational talent. I think he's a good running back. I don't think he's like this, like, oh, my God, he's the next best thing. But he's a good player. So, you know, if you're asking me, is he Rookie of the Year in actuality of, like, should he actually get the award? Absolutely not. Because his stats are mostly from just, you know, dunk and dink passes like that he makes up for because Ben Roethlisberger can only throw it 5 yards anymore. But when it comes to fantasy, absolutely he's Rookie of the Year. Because 13 points a game, I can't even get that from Zeke Elliott on my team, let alone a rookie from the Steelers. So I like Najee Harris as a rookie. But, I mean, let's be real. It's Ja'Marr Chase. You got the actual rookie. I just had to go with the second best option.
Now, Najee Harris is a very good pick, too. And we talked about this in a previous episode, too. That's like, he's producing solid numbers, but if you can imagine just if he had a better offensive line, he'd probably be producing way better numbers on the ground, through the air as well, too.
We saw what Jonathan Taylor can do with the Colts offense. Can you imagine Najee Harris there? Not saying Najee Harris is better, but, like, he could be doing potentially better than Jonathan Taylor is.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. So that's part of the attribution as to why Najee Harris' numbers are not as great, but they're still pretty good. So, yeah, we'll see if Pittsburgh can clean that up in the offseason as they go forward. But, yeah, that is our fantasy football award show. We went through a handful there. Definitely gave our picks for each of the different awards that we had there. Yeah, whenever you want to be aware about when the latest and greatest is happening, we already mentioned this at the top of the episode, but we're going to mention it again here. Follow us at all of our Twitter handles. We got my handle, UnderTheSide23. You got Tad's at TadTheSide94. You got the show handle, DDecide, guys. Fantasy football may be coming to an end here the next week or so, but but that doesn't mean that the talk has to stop. We definitely want to talk to you about who do you think is going to be the number 1 overall pick in 2022 fantasy drafts. What do you think about the incoming rookie class? Like, how are they going to shape up? Obviously off season, who should sign with a different team to up their fantasy value. If you want to talk about non-fantasy stuff, we're here to interact with you. Talk to us. We're here for you guys. We definitely want to hear from you. Subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel here on LAFB Network. To everybody that's already doing it, we appreciate you guys so much, but we definitely, unfortunately, need to close this episode on a bit of a somber note. In case you missed the news, John Madden, legendary head coach, sports broadcaster, creator of the video game franchise, has unfortunately passed away at the age of 85. I don't know if you saw the documentary that aired on Christmas Day. It was really well done. You got to hear about his journey after becoming a coach to becoming a broadcaster, and then obviously creating the video game franchise, and just how many lives he touched and how many careers he helped shape. And it's just like, Tad, I don't know if you were a football fan when he was still broadcasting. I'm pretty sure most of our listeners and viewers probably only know him from the video game franchise and maybe not as the broadcaster. He retired as a coach way before I was a football fan, so I didn't get to watch him as a coach, but definitely he was arguably, I think he's my favorite broadcaster to pair up with Pat Summerall. They're my favorite broadcasting duo ever. I haven't seen anybody that comes close to that. So I don't know if you got this chance to see much of his games being called as a broadcaster. Whether you hate the game or love the game, Madden has become the highest grossing sports franchise game in history. I wouldn't be shocked if it's top 10 on
all of video games.
Exactly. I wouldn't be shocked if it's up there among all other games too. This game is so widely recognized. They had guys like Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes come on the documentary. They talked about how amazing it was to grace the cover, and it's just they played as themselves. And it's just amazing what a career he left there. And Tad, I want to pass to you here to have any additional words here on the unfortunate news of John Madden passing away.
I can throw out all the cliches, he was the impact to me on the sport and all that stuff, and it's a cliche because it's true. He made an enormous impact on the game, and obviously there's not much I can say. A person who unfortunately never met him that can really add much to the conversation, but of course it's just very sad news. But hey, 85, he lived a very, very good, full life, and it's interesting because my grandfather is actually a diehard Packers fan. So even before I was a football fan, I had to sit down and watch these Packer games, and I will just never forget John Madden going, "This guy, Brett Favre." And that's my terrible John Madden impression. But the Brett Favre, just the way Madden would say that, I will never forget it. And he was a great guy. And of course, I just have to give a shout out to this. He was awesome. Awesome. And my favorite football movie of all time, The Replacements. If you guys have not seen The Replacements, go watch it. John Madden is an absolute right in that. A cheerleader is teasing, literally teasing the other team, and John Madden's I don't think that's allowed. And just the way he delivers it is just absolute gold. So yeah, it's unfortunate to hear about his passing. It really is, but I'm just happy that he's made it. His name, even if it is in a albeit very crappy video game, it hopefully will be fixed in the future, but he's just one of those guys that will just always be synonymous with football. He's never going to be forgotten. So his passing is very sad, but I'm just happy that his impact will be remembered going forward.
Yeah, completely agree with that one for sure. So rest in peace, John Madden. Our thoughts and prayers go out to his family. And we appreciate everybody that tuned into today's episode. Make sure you follow us on all the Twitter handles and subscribe wherever you watch your videos from YouTube, which is, I guess, YouTube. So I totally botched that ending, but we're going to go with it anyway.
Nailed it. Usually it's me that screws it up. I love this.
All right. We appreciate everybody that subscribes, who listens, who gave us a good rating, who watches us, anything and everything in between. We guys just can't thank you guys enough.
You nailed take two. Good job, buddy.